Hello and welcome to Pope from a Shelf, a Collector's Talk podcast. I am your host, Mike Behrman, and with me as always is my co-host, Right Hand of Doom, Will the Boss Ross. Will?
Hello, I am the Will.
Welcome, guys. This is a new venture that we're going into, trying to get some of that classic nerdity talk into your ears from any distance across the world. Thank you guys for coming and tuning in with us. Today's episode, later on, we're going to be talking about our very top Marvel villains. But first, we're going to introduce our buddies, our guests, our fabulous guests. With us, our first guy right here, my guy. Welcome, Jordan.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man, real good. Everybody who doesn't know, Jordan works with us, and he's a good friend of ours, and we're excited to talk about comics and shit. And our second guest, our other buddy, Nick. What's up, Nick?
Not much.
Yeah, welcome, dude. Thank you guys for coming and sitting down talk about some nerdy shit with us. I'm excited to get into it. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is our pilot episode, and for anybody who is wanting to know what the hell this is going to be like going forward, it's going to be very loosely scripted, and we're just going to get into some random chats about whatever topic we have. So if you guys have any suggestions going forward of stuff you would like to hear, please contact us. A big shout out to Wizards Comics and Collectibles in Sherwood Park, who's helping to bring this whole thing to life. And yeah, I'm really excited. It's been a hot freaking day. I don't know about you guys. I spent like all day basically like sleeping and being fucking lazy. I just couldn't get it working today. I don't know what my deal was, but
Yeah, even on my break when I was driving, I forgot how hot it was out there because I was just in here all day.
I think that's like the worst. You like go outside and you sit down in the car and all of a sudden your back is just like stuck to the car seat.
Yeah. And I was going to get a hot tea too. Maybe not.
I'm tired. I gotta get some coffee. Get over there. Like I'll take it iced.
Yeah, just get those Starbucks like ones that you shake in the glass bottles, which don't have the security seals on them anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yum.
So you can actually like mess those around.
Yeah.
You're a monster.
We've established that in the past.
Yeah,
There's a reason why the table's the gauntlet.
Will's here for like only more sugar than coffee, right?
Oh yeah, like I am sugar. Too much sugar, man.
Yeah, okay. I
Which
understand.
there seems to now be a limit as I get older.
On your sugar?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I used to be able to eat a whole box of Oreos. Now I can't.
See, I have the problem where like I'll just like crush a ton of sugar and then try and balance it by crushing a bunch of like savory junk food. So I'll like sit there and eat like a bag of M&Ms and like a bowl of popcorn at the same time, and just like, this is healthy. Trying to make it work. It's so bad. Well, today our topic is, like I was saying, top Marvel villains, and we've all done a little bit of looking at our top villains, and to make it interesting, we've made it a top 5 Marvel villains. The reason why we decided to go top 5, Will and I were talking about it, and we kind of decided that the whole idea was to get our top 5 villains. What do you guys think about like top villains? Like, where did you guys go immediately on that?
I had to think of my criteria first of all. So the things I was thinking were, who are the most iconic villains, which ones are the most powerful, and then total bias of which ones do I just purely like the most. And there's definitely everyone has a little bias in there, so
yeah, 100%. I mean, that's where we went right away. I think something clear to make and distinct right now is that we're going to be talking about Marvel Comics as opposed to Marvel movie franchises. Although that definitely weighs in on maybe our opinions of certain villains and how much we like them. We're definitely going to be referencing more of the comic books. Just as a heads up. I think I know where Nick's going to go with his top 5 villains. But what were you thinking about for like villains? Like, what was your criteria for gauging them?
Monologues.
Villain monologues.
Yeah.
So who could Hugo Weaving the best, basically?
Yeah, and who they are the best foil for as well.
Okay, yeah. Like, that makes a lot of sense. So if because that's kind of the villain role, right? Yeah. I really like the idea of historical significance in comics too, you know what I mean? Because there's some characters who are like really significant in their opposites comic life, and also like in comics in general, right? Like a guy like Lex Luthor is pretty significant in like just the history of comics, right? Or Joker, right? Because he's just been so popular for so long now. So that definitely like weighed in on like some of my opinions. What about you, Will?
I am the dumb when it comes to comics for the most part until I started working here. So I went off basically like the list that we made, like cool factor, all that stuff, and basically characters that I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I mean, like, because there's all sorts of stuff for villains. There's, like, kill count. There's, like, just raw coolness. There's, like, definitely power level, like Jordan was saying. Because if you're not, like, an actual threat, then you're not, like, that good of a villain, right?
Yeah,
like,
but
nobody's,
you're
like,
level
that scared of
threats.
Catman, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's always been the problem. Like, I think that's been part of my problem with some of, like, random classic Spider-Man characters is that they get, like, old and outdated when they don't upgrade their power levels. So guys like Shocker, you're just like,
Yeah.
what's happening?
They've made jokes about that in comics too, and
Yeah.
I find that I think one of the most recent Spider-Man series I read where I was like, oh, there's these villains. Sorry, I know this is kind of off topic.
No.
But I was reading through Spider-Man the Gauntlet, and it was just like all the different things they did with the villains. Like the Vulture's almost like a Hannibal Lecter type of character, where they're almost trying to figure out ways to make Spider-Man villains to have
Yeah.
these different personalities other than, aha, you got me, Spider-Man.
They're kind of like trying to like bring them back, especially some of like the classic guys who'd been hokey. I think the best one for that was when they did Electro, because Electro, and I had this argument with somebody at the store the other day, where were you here that Wednesday, Nick?
Maybe. I remember, I think maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because there was somebody else like last Wednesday morning, and they were going off about how the old school Electro costume is awesome. And when I made this point, and I was like, no, that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point is that it's awful because that big lightning bolt star across his face is just the hokiest villain costume of all time, and like in a real life situation.
Not even just like the star face mask that he wears or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's such a mess. So when they brought him back and they made him more like lightning-y, and I think that's kind of what inspired the Jamie Foxx look. I thought that was like a way better take in Gauntlet.
Yeah, I find they've even
Not
found...
the Jamie Foxx one. Though.
Not the Jamie Foxx one, though. Yeah. Oh, you mean the Blue Man crew? No, I'm not.
Spider-Man
generic
swing.
blue man.
It felt like he really blew himself for no reason in that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I find they even find ways to incorporate the star on there, like it'll be carved into his face or something like that.
Yeah,
or-
but that's fine, right? Like that's like a cooler look, right? It just feels more villainous, like a little more edgy at this point, as opposed to like the
Right.
big floppy star bits hanging off the side of his face, you know. So I think it's maybe rest assured that Electro's not in my top 5, but still a cool villain for sure.
That's when we get our first letters, is all the Electro fans are going to be writing in.
Yeah, everyone's all the
Female
How dare
Electro
you.
fans too.
comment. If I'll welcome you guys' hate. If you're here for Electro, definitely comment. Send
he
me an
feeds off
email.
insults.
Yeah, no, I'm more than happy to hear it. Just back up your boy Electro because he is a classic. Yeah, sometimes I think that's maybe part of it too, because looking cool goes like a long way.
Oh
for
yeah, I
comic
definitely
guys.
incorporated that too.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that
Like
one.
I think there's like a lot of characters who like survive just on the factor of being cool, not like purely, but like you know what I mean. Like you get extra reads just because like you're sweet, right?
Right.
Like
Venom and Carnage covers.
Everything with Wolverine, right? It's just, like there's a reason why he's in every book. It's because he's cool, right?
He's awesome.
Yeah, he drinks, he smokes cigars, he bangs Jean Grey, probably. I mean, it's yeah. Adultery, the coolest.
The ultimate superpower.
Oh my god. Okay, so we're gonna get into it, and I think we've all kind of got our own lists, and we're gonna try and come up with the all-time list, indisputable list, bulletproof. That's the game plan. Who wants to kick it off? Who's confident in their list? At number 5, we're gonna start. Oh, you know what? Let's start at number 1s, because we all know our number 1s.
It's the number 5 that's the harder
Yeah,
one.
4 and
number
5 are
1,
the hard
because we can
ones.
agree there's like 1 or 2 we
Yeah,
put in that
exactly.
number 1
Let's let
slot.
I know we should let, because Nick is not a employee. Let's him start, and we'll go clockwise.
Ooh, all the pressure, Nick.
All the pressure.
I think the obvious choice, especially if you're going by monologues, is Doctor Doom. Like what Hickman did with him, what so many writers have done with him, is fantastic. As a character, he is so up his own that he is able to be pretentious at the same time as being intimidating as hell.
Yeah, I think that's a really. I mean, I think that was pretty much all our.
I like your
choices.
monologue criteria. I don't think anybody in comics says like as cool as shit as Doctor Doom does.
He doesn't speak much, but when he does,
Yeah. Like everything, especially like there's some points in like oh man, in a bunch of modern stuff, but there's a couple points in FF, like specifically FF, the second book by John Hickman, where he's interacting with like little Valyria, where he just says like the most kind of awesome stuff, and then she, being like kid super genius Reed Richards, like says awesome stuff back to her, and it's this great kind of like you like. Have you read that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't remember any of it at the top of my head, but if I could quote him, I would.
Yeah. Really early in, I think, in the series, like the first 2 issues when they bring Doom into the fold,
Yeah.
it's just like him saying like a lot of cool stuff basically every other page.
Yeah, even him at like his weakest and most broken down is still frightening, and just how intense he is.
Yeah. So are we just gonna let the cat out of the bag on who like the 3 of us have at number 1? Or are we just gonna?
I've changed my number 1.
I
Change your number 1 as well. Okay,
I have one
apparently
that's kind of
shit's all
contending
changed.
too.
I thought that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say that I totally agree with Nick. Doctor Doom is my number 1 Marvel villain. In my opinion, it's not even close. I think Doctor Doom he looks cool. Like, he's super iconic, right? And his costume, like, always looks sweet. It's easy to draw, but there's a lot of depth to, like, the creepy eyes coming through, like, the slits. The mask, everyone loves that mask. It's super iconic. The mouth drawing thing that Jack Kirby did back in the day is, like, such a subtle thing, but it's just pure freaking genius, man. I think that, like, goes such a long way. Like Nick says, he says the coolest shit. Like, there's that point in the Master of Doom story arc where he, like, basically like goes like literally through all of time and back again, getting tortured a long way and owned a long way. He scoops up his mask and puts it on. He's just like, go through a whole thing like, how did you survive? What did you do? He's like, how did I do it? I did it because I'm Doom and stuff. And that was just the end of the story. And I was like, oh god, yes.
He also saved Final. I was gonna say Final Fantasy. He saved Fantastic Four for you, because I know we have an old video out that's still out, where you ranted and raved about the new Fantastic Four, and then Doom happened.
It's because it wasn't very good when they came out with New Fantastic Four. It was like really, like they had a issue of like Doom battling Galactus, and somehow at the end I wasn't like, that was super cool. I was just like, yep.
Well,
yeah, how do you do that with Doom v Galactus? You know what I mean? It just feels like that's a thing. I think like power level wise, he's crazy strong, right? Like he's
been God.
Yeah, he's been God like how many times? Like 2 at least, 3?
2 at least, I think.
Right?
3.
So like he's on that level of like, I literally conquered and remade the universe twice.
Yeah.
Right? And I think he's done the world like 4 times,
That
if
sounds
you count
right.
2 of them.
Yeah.
Because he did it in Emperor Doom, the graphic novel in the 80s. And I think he did it before. He like, man, yeah, he's been God, so he can totally like, he's taken out everyone. I'm talking like like Thanos, like all the good guys, like all those guys got wrecked by him. I think Doom is like top of the heap, man, because he says the coolest stuff, and I think he's awesome because he's got that irredeemable villain quality. You know what I'm saying? Where like, because he's not all bad. Like there's gray in there because sometimes he's good and he's very like self-serving and like self-preserving. So he does a lot of stuff out of that. But you always know he's going to turn in the end, and it's never when you expect it, which is what makes him great. But
The other thing about Doom is that he's not, as much as he's a villain, like he still cares about people, his people. Like he cares about the area because they belong to him.
yeah.
And he does what's best for them because it reflects well on him.
It's one of the cool things about him is that he's like the hero in his story, right? Like for sure.
I was gonna list off just my 2 cents as well. Is just like the powers thing. I think is a huge part of it. Where not only is he a scientist who knows like how to make all these crazy gadgets and shoot lightning,
Yeah,
but he's
like
also dwelled
Tony
in
Stark
magic.
and Reed.
Yeah, but also like knows magic and also knows all sorts of things. So I think it's just the variety of Doctor Doom that for me really gets it.
Yeah.
Where as a kid, when I was first starting to get into,
Because he can fight everyone.
yeah, I was like, oh dang,
Yeah.
what doesn't he do?
Because he can fight Doc Strange, he can fight Spidey, he can fight Hulk, you know what I mean? Like,
Triumph and Torment is a fantastic, I can't speak today,
You're good.
fantastic graphic novel where Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange go through hell.
oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't read that one. Was that a Doctor Strange one?
It was an original graphic novel.
Okay.
Mike Magnolia drew it with, I forget who wrote it. Fantastic. It deals with like Doctor Doom's mother, soul being owned by Mephisto, and his quest to save her soul.
That's super cool.
It's really, really cool.
That is
Yeah,
one of the
two
cool things about
doctors.
Doom because he's like he's looking after his own, right? But he's like so
dude's squad.
cutthroat about it, even when he's doing good stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think, man, it's crazy. It's definitely like the best book that Marvel is shipping us for free because they can't sell Doctor Doom right now. That comic's actually surprisingly really good, man.
See, I was looking at picking that one up, but I knew it wasn't selling, so I was like, is this good? But then
no, yeah,
apparently
because most of the other ones are trash because that's why they send us stuff for free because they can't sell it to people. But Doom is 100% top of my list. That was an easy one for me. Was number one.
If I can bring a pair of punching gloves to this,
I want to hear this.
yeah. So here's the thing. If I should backtrack and say if Doctor Doom is solidified as number one on the list, I would not even be upset by that, right? To me, I feel like that's pretty unarguable. Yeah. But if I'm going on a personal thought here, the one that just beats Doctor Doom for me by a smidgen is Magneto. And the reason I would say Magneto, I know technically maybe he's not quite as powerful as Doctor Doom, but the thing that I think Magneto has that Doctor Doom doesn't is I think he has a crazier backstory that makes people care more about him than they would say care about Doctor Doom. Like, he's a Holocaust survivor, and he's the one villain that everyone kind of looks at, and when he starts talking about mutant and humankind, they're kind of like, yeah, I know this is propaganda, but he kind of has a point.
He's like one of the most justified villains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think a sympathetic villain, for me, always kind of takes the cake more than, like, an awesome villain at the end of the day. Like,
I think a part of the sympathy is the fact that he's, like, had, like, a really rich rich publication history, you know what I mean? So not even just like the Holocaust background, but the fact that he's had a lot of character development and kind of change and direction and depth over time, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Doom, in his fantastic awesomeness, really is kind of the same guy he's been since the 60s, where he's just, yeah, man, you know, he doesn't need to change. That would be my argument. But man, I gotta say, like, Magneto is hard to fight Magneto as like one of the best villains.
He's definitely in my list.
Yeah, I always thought that like Magneto, when I was looking at it, Magneto lost out to Doom to me because I thought that Magneto was a better character. For sure, because I think Magneto might actually be one of Marvel's best characters because he's had like I said, he had like a really crazy history, right? Like how many times has it been good and then bad again? Like
all the time.
4 or 5. He was like running the New Mutant School for 40 issues at the end of that series, something like that.
So.
He's like the radical equivalent to a peaceful protest that is Xavier.
Yeah, but if you look at him now, like I think like the layman's idea of Magneto, like, you know, red helmet, I'm the bad guy, right, is like kind of woefully inaccurate over the last like 20 years of Marvel Comics, where he's not really been the bad guy very often in the last.
I now view him as an anti-hero more than I view him as a villain. Like, he does terrible shit, but
for a reason.
For reasons that you can understand and aren't purely self-serving. Like he does it for others because he still feels empathy.
Like ultimate Magneto, firm villain.
Yeah. I find it's similar with whenever Doctor Doom or Magneto team up with anyone, it's like they always kind of have a hidden agenda in the end or a personal account where they're like, okay, but what's going to happen after we solve this problem?
I think it's interesting that like our tops are all like kind of honorable villains too. So they're like both people who would like make a handshake deal and probably keep it, but they're also like firmly backstabbers, right? But it's not like we're talking like pure wild card insanity, right? Like if we were talking DC, I think like Joker would probably be top of my list, and that's a totally different kettle of fish, right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh, no kidding.
That's a big different one, man. I think there's a lot of depth to Magneto, and I think he goes like so long, and there's a lot of like relatable like fight the power in there, you know what I mean? Like I always liked X-Men because they're super inclusive, you know what I mean? Anyone can be an X-Man, like anybody who feels like different and like other can really identify with like being a mutant, especially as like a teenager, you know what I mean? I thought that was like kind of a genius move to have it like it turns on when you're a teenager in times of stress.
Right. It's a pretty big metaphor for puberty as well as a lot of other things, right?
Like, and it just like hits, I think, that age group too, right? Because like at that age, like, you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, man, like, you know, it's a weird, like a really easy, like instant connect. I think that like went a long way. And I think Magneto has got like a lot of that in him where there's a lot of, because like you said, Nick, he's so like almost justifiable, right? Where you're like, yeah, man, like, they shouldn't be killing all the mutants and stuff. And if you look back at like X-Men history, like there's so many times where it's just like, yeah, Magneto was like probably right. Like, yeah. And even if he was, and maybe that's like what makes him so awesome is that like he's always kind of been right, but his like methods were always like too extreme, right?
He just goes slightly too far, too often.
Yeah.
Like it's now, like with what they're doing with him now,
Super
and
cool.
is super cool, and it's showing that blending the two options between of the two main X-Men leaders is what makes the most sense.
Yeah, but I think that's what made X-Men interesting for 60 years too,
Yeah.
right? Was that like it was so great, and I think that's what makes Magneto so good. Is that it's so easy to be on Magneto's side. You know what I mean? And so he's like kind of an awesome villain because you end up like rooting for him. Like he's so sympathetic.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Will, dazzle us with your number one. I'm sure it's going to be hot trash. No, I'm just
Sorry.
kidding. I'm excited. Oh wait, sorry, Jordan. Go ahead.
Quick. This is going to be a quick pause.
No, get in
interrupt
there.
the video. We might just want to turn up the levels just a tiny bit. Sorry, I don't mean to backseat.
I can hear you quite well.
Oh, can you? Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Never mind then. I'm
Yep.
sorry. I'm watching them from afar, and I'm being a backseat sounder. You go ahead.
You do, yeah. I'll destroy you. So my number one villain is the Blob. I joke. It's
Okay.
Get him.
I was like, so talking of X-Men villains who are hokey.
the ultimate villain is myself, and the writer that is known as blank.
I'm not gonna lie. I was open-minded to it. I was gonna be like, interesting choice, but maybe he's got some points I haven't thought
It
of.
just reveals that you're just nicer than I am. I was like, what the F is the matter with you, you piece of shit?
No.
You take this seriously?
So we can all argue. We can all say Doom is definitely at least number one or like 1.5 to our own, depending on your fractions. But you know who's more badass than Doom? The man who taught Doom.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Marquis
This
of
was
Death.
coming. I knew this was coming.
He's sick. He's like, from what I read, he's like he's a guy who's like from our universe, our world, and he's like has powers to create. So like all the characters from Marvel and stuff, he's been writing villains and stuff, and they've been spawning in that world.
So, anybody who doesn't know the history of the Marquis of Death, he's got one comic story, and it's absolutely spectacular. It's called The Masters of Doom, Master of Doom.
Yep.
It's done by, was it like Brian Wood and somebody else?
Someone else.
Mark Millar, I think.
I have the issue that he's in, but I don't.
Yeah,
know that.
it's a really cool story. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you could find it. But he first appeared in a book called Marvel 1984, which takes place in our universe as a guy named Clyde Wincham Jr. And he's like a little kid who's getting like picked on, and like he's not at a good place in his house, and like he keeps like making superheroes and supervillains like show up in the world without realizing it, and they just kind of start terrorizing the real world, trying to get to him, and then he realizes what's happening and stuff, and they take him back to the Marvel Universe because he's the only mutant in the real world, and he's got like reality warping powers, so
Yep.
he can literally rewrite the world. And when he shows up as the Marquis of Death in, was it Fantastic Four?
562.
There you go. Oh, I thought I was gonna say 660 something. Jesus. He like literally like shows up in Latveria, like tears the armor off of Doom, like beats the hell out of him, and then throws him back to the beginning of time to get eaten by megalodons.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's how Doom becomes Doom.
that's like three whole pages, and that's like how you get introduced to this guy.
But it's so sick because he's the reason why I like him is because he succeeds kind of where Doom kind of like it's in the book too. He's like you failed, Doom, because it took you so how long to conquer your enemies, and he's just like going in like, you guys destroyed my life, and he's going like to every universe, killing the Fantastic Four and making them watch all their loved ones suffer. And it's just this awesome, sick, like, true evil character just wanting revenge.
He is like super, super, super evil, and it is
it's
just
so
a
good.
great Doom story too.
Yeah.
I think that if you want to talk about power levels, he's like right up there too, because that guy literally can remake the universe. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
it's
just
so
change
sick.
things. It's like, hey, you don't exist anymore, man. It's like having the Infinity Gauntlet, but you just do it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like Franklin Richards level, right?
It's definitely one of the more twisted stories of Marvel I've read in the main semi-universe. But I don't read a lot of twisted stuff anyways.
My argument is still that he's only been in one story arc. Though,
I know
right?
he needs to be in more, though.
So that he doesn't have the historical significance. He doesn't have that big stamp. Although when he showed up, he did make a sweet impression.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like
It if we were going on most powerful alone, like that would be the criteria. But
Yeah.
with the other criteria we talked about,
Yeah.
it's like the other ones check more of the boxes than this one.
For sure.
Yeah, he's super powerful. He does say some awesome stuff.
He says some really cool shit.
He does it's one of the most villainous villain stuff I've ever seen.
And some of the most over the top cool villain stuff.
He's awesomely designed. And as a standalone book to read, it was sick. And he's the teacher to Doom, which at the end is sick. Is a sick Doom moment.
The payoff at the end is absolutely spectacular. Sorry, Nick, you were going to say something?
But he might be a flash in the pan. There's not enough of him to say that if someone else could write him as well, to say that he could be developed in an interesting direction. Like, there's always a possibility that he could be, but is he going to be?
Like, that's kind of fair. There's not it's not like he has the same character development as a guy like Magneto. You know what I mean? Because he's been written for
Magneto
40
is
years,
definitely
50 years.
good. That's why Magneto is definitely on the list. But McKee is definitely my number one. Doom
That's
is
fair.
1.5, but I'm everyone's gonna say Doom, so I wanted to choose my
You're trying to pick your
My
favorite. So
number
this is
one.
your true favorite number one.
real number one is Doom, but my favorite is
Yeah. Okay.
is
So
Marquis.
if you were objectively, you might pick Doom, but if it was in your heart, in Will's heart, it's Marquis all the way.
it's
all
a
right.
tie
That's fair.
between
I can
the
give
two.
you that. Yeah, man. That's I would never argue that. That's legit.
Yeah. And I would place Magneto at my number 2.
Yeah, if we're
dare
getting,
you.
if
Sorry.
we're getting into that, I actually also had Magneto at number 2.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was really close between him and Doom because I think we got into how good Magneto is and he's just such a great character. But I just think Doom is more villainous at the end of the day because you can always trust Doom to be a villain, whereas Magneto's more complicated than that, and that's what makes him so good.
Magneto was my number 3.
Really?
Because
Number
Doom,
three?
because Doom was number 2.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. They
That's
all
fair.
shuffled down.
Everybody got boots down one.
Yeah.
Who'd you have at number 2?
I had Dr. Doom.
You
Yeah,
had
so
Doom
it
then?
was all
Alright.
switched.
So we're at Doom and Magneto 1 and 2.
It's one of those things we
right?
can't even be mad at each other. It's like which one's better, Alien or Aliens. Doesn't matter which one you think is better. We all know those two are at the top.
Yeah,
sort
they're
of
both
thing,
sweet. For the record, it's Alien.
The comic
It's
or the
Aliens.
movie?
It's Alien.
New
It's
fight.
always Alien.
New podcast
Aliens.
right now.
What are we even talking about? You want to watch the?
Kiss.
Next, you're gonna tell me that you'd rather watch Transformers than Prometheus. Come on.
No,
Probably.
Prometheus. I prefer that, but that's okay. We'll get to that on another podcast.
That was an unfair
New
comparison.
idea. Yeah, I was gonna
Transformers
say.
is trash.
It's like, no, I wouldn't. I would say Aliens is better than Alien, but
Aliens is really good. I just think that I like the spookier version.
That's
opposed
fair.
to the actiony version.
yeah. And that's the thing, right? I think if we actually discuss this at the end of the day, same thing as Doctor Doom and Magneto, we'd be like, yeah, they both have merit, and I can't be mad
I
at it.
also feel like Aliens runs a little long
That's fair.
at the end because there's 45 minutes at the end where she's walking around with the gun and
love the crap out of that
flamethrower taped
scene.
together, and
I
it's
love the
unreal,
tension.
and it's so tense, and the sirens are going, and the lights are spinning too. But it's it's a pretty long ending, man. And then you have to get back to space, and then you have to have that awesome fight too. I mean, it's just God damn, let's go.
It's so
It is
good.
really good. Okay. So we got Doom and Magneto. I think that's pretty bulletproof.
Yeah.
However you want them at number 1 and 2. Those guys are and power levels they're up there, right? You have to be a world-ending threat to be on the list, I think.
Yeah, Avengers level threat.
I
Yeah,
disagree
yeah.
with
Everyone's
the-
an Avengers
I
level
disagree
threat
with that
now.
completely.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. We'll get to that later. But
Okay, yeah. No, that's
I disagree
cool.
with that.
No, go for it. How come?
because Wilson Fisk exists.
Oh, that's pretty good. But I would argue that Wilson Fisk is a world threat. Maybe not always world ending because he doesn't want to end the world. He wants to control the world.
I would kind of argue that almost with sort of the same thing that Will was saying about the Marquis of Death, where he's not necessarily the most dangerous, but he's also someone who's pulling the strings, where it's technically you had to fight Scorpion and Shocker, but Kingpin was kind of behind it the whole
Yeah.
time.
Kingpin's
That
an
is
So-
kind of
awesome
his
lesson
thing.
for-
Yeah.
Wilson Fisk is spectacular.
He's a bit of a puppet
Is
master.
that who you have at number 3, Nick?
5.
That's who you have at number 5? Oh man, he just
Ooh,
makes the cut.
interesting.
Okay, I'm interested in who you have at number 3 then. Who do you got at number 3?
3 is Thanos.
3 is Thanos? Are we getting into Thanos here?
Yeah.
I like Thanos. I think Thanos deserves the top 5 just for his what's the word I'm looking
so
for? His
iconic.
resume alone. He's super
so
iconic.
right
yeah.
now.
And his resume of the original Cosmic Cube story, his battles against the original Captain Marvel, the best Captain Marvel in my opinion.
Second best Captain Marvel.
Oh yeah, who do you like better?
The second Captain Marvel.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Like the 80s Captain Marvel?
The Sun. of the original Captain Marvel.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you're right, because the original one was like only a flash in the pan. That's
Yeah.
right.
Because the one that died was the original.
yeah.
And then his son was the one that had the bands and the Rick Jones in his head for a while. That
Yeah.
one I prefer more, but that's...
Okay,
besides
yeah,
the
that
point.
one's pretty good too. I think that's the Roy
I haven't
Thomas
seen
era.
that one.
Is really
No,
solid.
I haven't either.
I haven't.
Now I gotta
Yeah,
check this out.
it's some older Captain Marvel, some older sweet space stuff. Speaking of, but that's what I mean. Like, I think Thanos is so tied to that type of stuff. Like, if you want to talk about Captain Marvel and like Quasar and the Guardians and stuff, then you're in like Silver Surfer. You end up talking about Thanos, right? And like, man, like you want to talk about guys who've conquered and remade the universe. Like no one's done it more than Thanos. Like Doom's 3 times. I think Thanos is like 6.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys can answer me this question. So I did research on these characters and I have notes down here. So for Thanos, I have shoots plasma. Was that an actual thing?
Yeah, so because Thanos has got like the crazy space tech and he's a genius, he like literally has like plasma blasters on his wrist.
Oh,
I
he has
guess.
like the
It's-
bracelet guns.
Yeah, it's not like from his hands.
Yeah.
He's a Titan, so he has access to technology that we don't have.
I
He
was
is-
reading that, and it was just like he had like the glaive. He's super smart tactician. He can shoot plasma, and just no explanation.
Will's just like he's like horking plasma loogies across the battlefield.
Piston streams of plasma.
It's just like he's just spitting plasma in Wayne Knight's face over and over. Sorry, Nick, you're going on about the plasma blasts or something?
No,
Apologies, I totally railed with you
He's a
there.
Titan, so he has access to technology we don't have. He's a what is it? He's not a mutant and
He's a deviant.
a deviant
Yeah.
Titan.
Oh.
So he's both. He has the powers of both an eternal and
And a deviant.
and deviant, which makes him insanely powerful.
Yeah.
And it's also why he is the way he is, because of the discrimination he faced. And they go into that in the backstory as well.
That's a really cool graphic novel. That's
Yeah.
the Thanos Rising
Yeah.
miniseries. Yeah. That one's really good. If anybody's looking for how Thanos like met Mistress Death and became that fascinated with it, I'm into it. I gotta say that especially if we're talking about him, I much prefer comic Thanos to movie Thanos.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
that movie Thanos is bad. I just think the not loving or like the movie Thanos is just so empathetic. You know what I mean? Like, because his whole idea for his plot is like, hey, we got half the universe can survive. It's like, well, that's a twisted, way to do it, and that's insane. But it's also, you know what I mean? Like I said, he like apologizes the whole time. He's always got like a forlorn look on his face, like, look, I'm really sorry, but this is the way it has to be, right?
Is he like the Magneto of the movies?
Like sort of, like he just, you know what I mean? And he's this big badass. Whereas like in the comics, he's just doing it because he can, because he's absolutely
waifu.
bonkers, right?
Yeah,
He's totally
he
crazy.
wants-
Yeah.
And like he wants to be with Death, and he never can. Is part of the thing.
Yeah. Trying to
Um,
win Mistress Death's hand.
yeah.
She's always kind
And
of
he does
smart.
something to Deadpool, and then that's how we get Deadpool.
But
Deadpool.
that's part of why it works, I think, in the comics too, because you don't have like the pressure to have a resolution by like ending Thanos. You his whole fascination with Death and like her spurning him and like that over and over. They've like had that, and then he like goes away from her, and he always goes back, right?
Yeah.
And that's like I think what makes it genius in the comics, because then you always have. He always has motivation to do his Thanos
Yeah.
stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's like a jilted lover. So like,
Yeah.
it's weird to think of him that way, but he'll get over her occasionally, and then eventually always go back.
And Thanos says sweet shit.
Yeah, that's
He
like,
He
that's
is.
the main reason.
I love Jim Starlin writing
Yes.
Thanos. I could get into that forever. I understand how some people can kind of get a little tired of it because the space opera is so over the top, and that sometimes on his like soliloquies, he's just so ridiculous. But he's awesome. I think that's part of what makes him so great.
That's part of my monologue criteria. It's
Yeah.
up there.
Have you guys seen the Silver Surfer cartoon?
No, I haven't.
You should watch it. I think because they do. I think the best adaptation of Thanos, because he has like this great. I don't even remember who does the voice acting, but he does the voice acting. He does a great like really simpering kind of voice, and that's like kind of always barely under control. And to make it good for kids, they just changed Mistress Death to Mistress Chaos. Same costume design, they just call her Chaos instead. I get it, because that would be maybe a little scary, because she's literally
good old
the
Chinese sense, right?
skull faced. Yeah, you know what I mean. But he's very like sitting in like his ship, brooding, like going off rambling crazily to Mistress Death and like shouting and screaming and then doing things and then, you know, pontificating about how good he is to Silver Surfer and stuff, right? Like he's just so grandiose, you know what I mean? Like he's like super larger than life. I think that's what makes him like such a good villain, because he's like the ultimate like over the top threat, right? Because he's not just gonna like walk into your house and like steal your TV or like beat you up or like kill your fam. He's gonna, you know what I mean, like literally like blink you out of existence. You know what I mean? Just because he can. Like, and literally just because he can, right? Like, no other reason. Not, like, for revenge or something, right? Yeah. Like, I think that puts him really good. I didn't have him that high, actually. I think I had Thanos a little lower than that, but he definitely made my top 5. Personally, I rated him slightly lower because Thanos, for the most part, in comic books, has really had his heyday in the last 30 years as opposed to the prior 30 years, right? Because before that, he really had, like, the Cosmic Cube story, and that was about it, right?
No, Thanos.
Yeah, and I think that there's some classic villains, or I put a classic villain who I think deserves to be higher than him. Yeah. But he was my number 4, personally.
I think that's the thing about when I was writing out a lot of these villains, there was just so many that were like the big baddie, and that was kind of it, right? Where it's like, hey, they can end life as we know it, and they will. And I had to think of which ones do I actually like more than the others. So I also had Thanos on my list, but he was kind of just lower because I made realizations that I thought, hey, I like these ones.
I think Marvel does those types of villains like better than they do the more grounded villain, right? So it's less like I think part of what makes Batman's rogue gallery so attractive is that there's a lot of guys who's just like, this guy's gonna murder your family, but it's terrifying, and they've got a lot of really good comics that like go with it, because that's basically Joker in a nutshell, right? Or Victor Zsasz, who I think is a really good like B
terrifying character
villain, because he can just show up and do stuff, and it's great. You got him there when you need him, right?
Right.
You know, you got a lot of those guys, classic ones like Two-Face. You know what I mean? He's not powered at all, right? Like, and they're great villains, but they're not to the same like world-ending extent. And I think Marvel like really does that well, where they just like, if you want to do some like over the top, like, hey man, this guy isn't just going to destroy the universe; he's going to unmake it and then make everything Thanos, or whatever, right? Like, I think that type of shit, or like the Marquis, right? He's just going to like change the universe around him.
But Marvel also really likes their team ups that I've seen in my personal experience, so it makes sense why they have such high level characters.
I mean, because you got to bring everyone together.
Yeah, you got to sell those books. But no, Jordan,
you got to sell that summer crossover.
Tell us our number 3. I'm waiting for Mike.
My number 3. This is my
on this.
Well, here's the thing. I think Mike even brought up a good point of like a lot of the Marvel villains are the world-ending ones. So my number 3 is really different, and I know some people will rise their fists at this, but I had Carnage as my number 3 from Spider-Man. Here's my thought on that. So just kind of going off of what Mike said too, right? There's not many like actual serial killers in the Marvel universe, right? And then you get Cletus Cassidy, who is, and when you read some Carnage comics, you're like, holy crap, yeah, this guy says some really freaky stuff. It's it actually feels like a real serial killer, and you could sort of psychologically unpack him a little bit. So here's where I kind of differed from myself, and I kind of forced myself to put Carnage, because technically I like Venom better, but I just thought Carnage was objectively a better villain if I was trying to make this list objective.
Pick like actual villains.
I also think he's sort of like the peak of the symbiote story, where you see the symbiote get on Peter Parker, and you see what happens when it gets on someone who is actually like got a good heart. You see it get on someone who's like just a bitter, angry person, like Eddie Brock, who maybe wouldn't have killed people before, and now he is. I mean, in some versions maybe he was. But then it gets on, and that's like the thought of like, person. What if, right? Yeah. What if an actual serial killer had this amount of power? And now, in more recent events too, if I'm going to argue them a little further, right? If we're establishing power level, I mean, Absolute Carnage just came out not that long ago, and I feel like history is going to solidify that as a big part of Carnage. That there was a time where he actually could just take over the world. He's flicking pieces of symbiotes on people. They're also becoming little.
That's a big
Carnages.
one, because that's like really his push to be like an actual world threat, right? Like, whereas before he was more of like a Maximum Carnage, we're going to kill a bunch of people in New York threat.
Right.